Welcome back to your channel dedicated for Revit content for interior designers. I'm Zach here at BIMteriors, and today we're going to be talking about curtain walls. And there's so much that I want to share with you regarding curtain walls that I've actually decided to drop this into three sessions that I'll be releasing. And it will be broken down into session one, where I'll be going over everything that you kind of need to know, the basics, that basic foundation of the curtain wall family itself, and understanding how to create it, how it works, how we can add mullions, how do we add custom mullions, and how do we even create a custom mullion if it's a certain size or certain profile that we want. Getting a better understanding of how to edit that actual family and the structure of the curtain wall. Then we'll be jumping into that famous curved curtain wall. There's so many times that everyone wants to create that beautiful curved curtain wall, but using the curtain wall elements, it actually creates these segmented parts and it doesn't look like a curve. And so I've got tips and tricks to create that beautiful curve that will be coming in session two. And lastly, session three. There's so many elements within Revit that we have to think differently as interior designers. And when it comes to the curtain wall, what a great way to think about a curtain wall is, so instead of the glazing and mullions, what about if that's a panel structure? So in this case here, a wood wall panel, and instead of the mullion, it's a reveal. So now you're creating super easy panel systems within your projects and the customization at kind of your fingertips. So if you want to reveal so often, or if you want a custom pattern, with a click of a button, you can get all of this. So today's session will be getting that base foundation before we kind of get into the more complex elements. So let's jump into session one. Okay, so today we're going to be kind of jumping into part one of this drop, where we're going to get a better understanding of the curtain wall and the tools that, how do we draw a curtain wall, how can we modify it, and all of the properties and tools that come with a curtain wall. So in this way here, the next time you go to tackle this within your project, you know the ins and outs and have that basic foundation. So first things first is, where do we find it? So at the top of your ribbon under the architecture tab, where you have the wall icon, drop this down and you can see, okay, well, wait a second, we're going to walls. This isn't a wall. In matter of fact, it actually is. So as you start to drop this down, we're starting to go to a curtain wall. Now, it's not a basic wall, but it is a curtain wall. Now, Revit out of the box has three categories where they have wall empty, wall exterior glazing, wall storefront. And at the end of the day, really doesn't matter, because you're going to understand the better understanding of the functions and really be able to tailor these properties to better suit your needs. So within here, for this example, I'm going to go to wall empty. And you're going to see here, as you start to draw this, it's going to be a very similar workflow to your walls, where you start at one end and you drag it over to the other. Now I've also got a 3D view open here so that you can start to see what this is going to look like in real time. So as we start to draw, modify, add elements to this curtain wall, you're going to see this visually happen and what the impact of adding and modifying these elements are. Now, when I have this selected, you're going to have a very similar parameters and properties to your wall. So that might be base constraints, base offset, top constraints, unconnected height. So again, very similar workflows and navigating a curtain wall, very similar to walls. Now you can start to see here as I pan in, we've really just created this glazing. It's like a glazing that stops. It's got a length and a height, and that's about it. But now we want to add more info into and more properties into that curtain wall. So if you select on the curtain wall, go to edit type, and it's going to bring you to a new properties dialog box. And before we do anything, my biggest thing is that we actually hit duplicate. Because again, there could be multiple team members working in this project, and we want to make sure that if this is being utilized somewhere else that we don't know, we're not modifying that specific instances. So I'm going to hit and create a new one and call this test for today's example. Now, under the type parameters and construction, under function, you can see here, as interior designers, we want this to be interior for most of the scope of our work. However, if I drop this down, you can see that there are different options. It's most likely going to be either interior or exterior. So I want to make sure in this example, we're hitting interior. Automatically embed. So what that means is that if there is a other wall, one of those basic walls, that as you start to draw this, if you put it within that wall, it will embed itself and create a void space and void opening. So in this way here, it places in that wall perfectly. So again, this can be changed at any time. It depends on how you want this to function within your project. So for this example, maybe I don't want it. It's going to be a standalone screen, and I'm going to leave this unchecked. Curtain panel. This is where you can start to input as you're drawing it. What is that panel? Is that glazing? In this here, you can see your drop down. You can actually pick walls. You can pick curtain walls, stacked walls, system panels. So in session 3, in that third drop, I'm going to be going over how to create these custom panels and what are custom panels and what can they even be used for. So again, in that session, we're going to be using a architectural curtain wall, but flipping it and using it for an interior design kind of approach where that curtain wall is now going to be an actual wall panel system. And maybe that's a wood wall panel system, and actually creating a panel that has your cleats, your substrate, your finish. And so instead of that glazing, you're getting that panel. And as we start to create these grid lines, and instead of putting mullions, maybe you're putting that reveal. So stay tuned for more information on how to utilize architectural interior, architectural tools within Revit, but within interior design mindset. So for today, I'm just actually going to pick glazed. Join condition will show you more as we kind of start to create grid lines and these mullions, the conditions that we can have. You can see if I drop this down, there's a few. Now I'm going to keep this not defined so that I can show you the differences later on in this video. You can see now we get into the vertical grids or the horizontal grids and the layouts. So right now I've got nothing. I've got a glazed pattern or a glazed panel, and that is it. Now I can start to create a layout. So as I start to create this panel, I can say, okay, do I want fixed distance, fixed numbers, maximum spacing, and minimum spacing? And so for this example, I'm going to say maybe fixed distance. And at every 1500, I'm going to want a vertical grid. So if I hit OK, you can see here at every 1500 millimeters, it now inserted a grid line. Now, if I zoom in, it's just a grid line. It's split the panel, but there's no mullion. So we'll get to that. Now, if I go back to edit type, I'm going to bring back, again, we can do that same workflow. So we only did that for our vertical. Maybe we want to do that for our horizontal. So I'm going to go fixed distance at 1500, hit OK. So now at every 1500, it's going to add a vertical or horizontal grid. That's ready for us. If we wanted to add a mullion, it's now ready for us to apply one to it. I go back to edit type. This is where we're going to get into our vertical and our horizontal mullions. These mullions are broken down into 3 types. So we've got interior type, border 1, and border 2. And so if I come down here and drop this down, you can see that these are the out-of-the-box mullions that Revit's provided us. Now, in a later session, I will get more into how do you create custom mullions and profiles to be able to use within your current panels. But for today, we're going to use the out-of-the-box options, and I'm going to hit rectangular mullion, and maybe I want it to be the 50 by 150 and hit OK. So you can see here, everywhere where I've got an interior mullion or grid line, it's now going to, or a grid line, I should say, it's going to host a mullion to that grid line. You can see if I zoom in, there's nothing on my perimeter 1 or 2. And so if I go back, select on my curtain wall, hit edit type, and if I scroll down and if I change my borders, you can see now if I select my rectangular mullions, 50 by 150, and I'll do the same for border 2 and hit OK. You can see now anywhere where I have that start and that finish, my border 1, my border 2, I now have that mullion assigned to that start and end point. Now we can do the same, I'm going to scroll out, We can do the same for our horizontals. So if I select on our current panel, hit edit type, I can scroll down here and start to apply those mullions to those grid patterns that we just created up here. So I'm just going to go and apply all of the same. That is not the same. And hit OK. Now, once doing so, you can see all of those grid lines that we have created from that fixed distance. It's now applied a mullion to that grid line. Now, that's great, but maybe now you want more of a kind of a blank canvas. You might want your perimeters, but I don't want these interiors, and I want to have that customization and that ability to create whatever I want. So if that's the case, what I'm going to do is select on my curtain wall, hit edit type, and right now what I'm going to do is under my layouts, I'm going to say I don't want a layout because I'm going to want to create a custom layout to my design. And in doing so, again, you're going to get this error message. All that's saying is that there's grid lines and there's mullions, and those will be deleted in your project, and that's fine. I'm going to hit OK. Now I've got that blank canvas. I've got my border mullions assigned to this curtain wall, and I want to start to create something custom. And this is where in the architecture tab, under curtain grids, and if you select this, I could start to place grids wherever I want. And keep in mind, your curtain wall already has those mullions. So as I create a grid, it's going to apply that mullion to that grid, which is amazing. It's what we want. If you don't want that, go back to edit your type and change that from your property. So as you create these, it's not automatically placing a mullion to your grid line. These are super easy to navigate, and tab, again, tab is going to become your best friend. So as you tab, hitting on the grid lines, you can change this to whatever, moving, pulling, or coming in here and entering a value of maybe that's 600 and hitting enter. You can also come to your grid lines, and instead of a whole segment, you can actually do maybe one segment at a time. So maybe there's a custom design that you're going to want to have. You now have that ability to go as custom and as creative as you want. The other part is that maybe there's different materials that are in your panel, so it's not all glazing. So the cool thing is, if I scroll in, I can hit tab and get onto that panel. And if I unpin this and come over here to its properties, you can see I can start to change these. And so you can see I can change these from walls to other curtain panels or to other custom panels that I might have in here already. So in this case here, I'm going to hit solid, and you can see you can start to play around with whatever design that you're trying to achieve. Now, lastly, before I end this video, you can see here this join. This is where we're going to talk about joins. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit on the curtain wall so I can see this a bit more clearer. I'm going to edit type, and for my vertical interior types, I'm going to pick a smaller one so I can drastically see this going on. So this join here, this is not how we want this. This is visually not how it's going to happen. And so how do we fix this? If I select on the mullion itself, you can see now it goes into a modify curtain wall option. And what I'm seeing here is a make continuous mullion option, join option, or I can break at joint. So you can see here, that's more what I want to start to see, is I want to start to see them breaking at joint rather than having this very unique and weird connection. So you can modify that. So understanding your join options, you can edit that into your curtain wall property. So in this way here, as you're creating it, it joins automatically for you. So that is a wrap on drop number 1 and getting that basic foundation of understanding of the curtain walls. Stay tuned for a later drop of the curved curtain walls and how can we create a curved curtain wall without those segments. And then later again with how to create your custom panels. So really taking a different approach from your traditional architectural curtain walls and really kind of putting your interior designer cap on and thinking of how we can use these tools as interior designers. That is a wrap on session 1, getting a better understanding of the curtain wall, the tools that you have accessible to you when creating curtain walls, editing curtain walls, just in general, getting a better understanding of how to utilize curtain walls within your projects. If you're hearing this message, it means you listen to the new content all the way to the end. And for that, I thank you. Please stay tuned for next week's drop, where I'll be going over the curved curtain wall without those segmented pieces.